Okay. So welcome everybody. It is so wonderful to have you all here. Um, really pleased to have you as part of our session here. And just give me a moment. I'm having some challenges connecting to Facebook, and I know there are people who want to watch it there. So um, just give me a moment to make that happen. There's always some technology that gets in the way, so I'm just going to go ahead and try and get that going right now. Okay, you know what? It's not going to work, so we'll just go with what we have here and I'll post it to Facebook later. Welcome, all of you. I'm so excited that you're here. This is my chance to get to see a lot of you that I don't normally see day to day. It's really fun for me to touch base with people. What we're going to do today is a master class, and then I'm going to leave time to just answer a lot of questions as well. So I'll invite you, if you have questions throughout our session, the easiest way for me to find it in the chat is if you put a couple question marks at the beginning of it. So maybe 3 question marks and then your question. And I also have Michael from the Clarinet Mentors team who's going to try and help assemble the questions so that I'm able to answer them. But a master class is basically a group of clarinetists like we have here. We're either all sitting in one room or we're in one big virtual room. A few volunteers are playing, and I'll be giving them feedback. And here's the wonderful thing about master classes. Even if we have people from different levels of experience, which we do today, because as you know, I just sent out an email a few days ago saying, hey, who wants to play? And some brave souls stepped up and volunteered. The kind of challenges we have are pretty universal on clarinet. So if one person says, I'm having trouble with high notes, or another person says, oh, I want my fingers to move faster, we can probably all relate to that. So what I want you to do as you're watching today, even if you have your clarinet out, even better, is to ask yourself, how could I use these same techniques in my own playing? How could I use this to make my high notes better or make my fingers faster? And just take a note of what we do. I know for myself in my own training, I've attended many master classes. I still do. I love learning things. And I learn a lot more watching other people have lessons than often I do when I'm having lessons myself. I'm a lot more relaxed and I just sort of have a chance to really observe what's happening. So another rule of thumb for the chat, I kind of have a tradition when I do master classes. If someone is brave enough to play for us, I like to honor them by, those of you listening, just type into the chat as you're listening to them play something you appreciate about their performance. So not criticism, but just like something that you really appreciate. Because if you're anyone like me, and most of us have this as musicians, they're going to play, and afterwards, you know, they might have done 10 things really, really well and 2 things they didn't like, and all they're going to think about is, oh, I can't believe I played that F sharp, or ah, my tone sucked there. And going back and then reading those as a reminder of, oh yeah, but actually that was really nice. Oh, and I was really expressive, and we need to have that balance. So your job as listeners is support our performers. And here's the order I'd like to go in if everyone is here today. Eileen to go first, Mike to go second, Gwenda third, and then Tom. And I've asked our performers if they're able to send me a recording first, just in case Zoom doesn't go well. So what we're going to do is look at their music, listen to the recording together, and then I'll work with those people. So Eileen, if you're on the call, can you unmute yourself and make some noise? And that will put you higher in my feed, so I will see you. And to unmute yourself. There you are. Hi, welcome. Great to see you. So Eileen, thank you so much for volunteering. I have your video and music, which I'll put up, but would you mind sharing with the group maybe what your focus is, sort of if there's anything in particular you would like help with for this session, what that would be?
Well, I'd like to have it be easier to jump from a lower note up to the higher register, like going from a C, D, F on the staff up to the high C. It always gets really a little strained and wonky around there, and I'd like to figure out how to make that happen so it doesn't happen.
Fabulous. And I think that's something a lot of clarinetists can relate to. I'm going to just hopefully on screen now, you can all see the video that Eileen sent us and the music that she's chosen to play. This idea of kind of jumping up to high notes, like at the end of the third line, that's
Right.
tricky for all of us, right? And also, Eileen, thank you so much for on short notice preparing this music for us. So here's what oopsie, sorry, I've pushed the wrong button there. Okay, let me get rid of that. Let's give it a listen, and then if you have your clarinet out, we'll do some work together. So I'll go back to your video here. All right, nice job, Eileen. There's a lot that I really like in that. Let me ask you, as you listen to this recording and realizing listening through Zoom might not sound as good as it would on your computer, but do you hear, first of all, how do you think that particular interview F to C went on this recording compared to?
Better than usual.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good, actually.
Yeah, it just, anytime I'm wandering around up there in the above the G above the staff, it's a chance as chance can.
Okay, and let me ask you then, what do you think made it work better than usual? Like, what are the things that you think about when you're trying to make the high notes come out better?
Well, I played this a few times before I recorded it. I'll confess to that. And I think it seems to go easier if I remember to change my air somehow, but I'm not quite sure how I do that. And also change my embouchure a little bit. And I'm sure not reliable enough in what I'm actually doing to make it always happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Sometimes we have things that sort of work for us and we don't have an exact analysis, what is it that I'm doing? But I actually think on this recording, you had F to high C, it went quite well. So I want to talk about, just because there's a lot of clarinetists here on the call and a lot of clarinet teachers on this call, the things I think about that I keep in mind if I'm trying to make my high notes better. And Eileen, you're probably doing some of these, and clearly you were on that recording because some of those intervals came out really well. For many of us, we may not think about something called voicing, and voicing is like the shape of our oral cavity, what our mouth is like inside of our mouth. And the biggest thing we can control there is where our tongue sits. And if we don't think about where our tongue sits, it likes to hang out at the bottom of our mouth where it's nice and relaxed and doesn't have any work to do. And for us as clarinetists, depending on the style of music that we're playing, we want to experiment with our tongue being in different positions. So if we're trying to like scoop pitch and bend pitch a lot, like we do in jazz or in classical music, having our tongue lower can make the pitch go down, and raising it up can make it go up. And if I just kind of, if this was an x-ray of my tongue, if I'm moving it around a lot, which I wouldn't do in Vaughan Williams, the piece you just played, but let's say I'm doing something jazzier, that would help me. So our tongue can give us a brighter sound, a darker sound, just experimenting with things like that. If I were to generalize in classical music, and I'll call the Vaughan Williams certainly based on classical music, we want our tongue to be very, very high in our mouth, higher than it would normally sit. And what that does is it creates a really narrow passage for our air to whoosh through there at really high speeds. And it makes those high notes come out much more easily with a much more focused and clear tone. So a very sensitive note is that high C that you had in that piece at the end of the third line, thumb and register key. And if you're watching this and you do play in the high register and you have not experimented much with voicing, this is a really good note to work on, because any movement to the tongue is extra sensitive. We'll hear it on that note. So if I were to, let's say this is my X-ray machine, here's my tongue high, and to have it high, we think of saying he. And I almost emphasize the H sound because that seems to bring up the sides of our tongue. So my tongue would be high and arched if I'm saying he, and then as I go through the syllables, I would kind of do this. He, it's at the very bottom. Listen to what happens to the sound of that note as I change it. So of course you're hearing the pitch drop. You're also hearing the tone change a little bit as well. And so a great exercise is to take a tuner, and I don't have one hooked up directly through Zoom, but I'll just hold one up to show you. And if you want to check if your voicing is good, and Eileen, I am coming back to you, just you reminded me of this great exercise, so I do want to play it. So I have my phone out with TE Tuner, which I kind of like because it has happy faces. Let me just play my high G. So if I'm in tune, it smiles, which I really like. If I play, and make sure you're muted if you're watching us other than Eileen, who will unmute when she talks. I'm going to go from G, slurring, to A, lift another finger to B, up to that high C. If I see each note getting a little bit flatter, especially the high C being the most flat, that's a visual clue your tongue is probably lower than is ideal for classical music. So if my tongue was in a bad position, that'd be super obvious, and I wouldn't sound good. So I'll demonstrate that, maybe more of that ha position. So I'm already really flat even on the first note. The poor tuner was going, I'm concerned about you. And by the top note, it was so flat, I was closer to a B than a C. Now, usually we can tell if that's the case, but let's say my tongue is just a little bit off, maybe more like a hey position. The first note might look pretty close to in tune, but you're going to notice it gets more and more out of tune as I go. That was really revealing that each note got more and more out of tune. And so by looking at the tuner, getting that high C in tune, and often if we're just thinking higher, higher, we sort of subconsciously raise our tongue. It helps us get a sense of where we want the tongue to be. So I did want to share that exercise. Some of you have probably seen it before, but it's a really good one. Eileen, I think your voicing is pretty good. Is that something you've worked on before? You might need to unmute yourself just so I hear you again.
Yeah, it's the thing I'm most conscious of, I think.
Yeah, it's great. That makes a big difference.
I mean, when my main place I play besides in my room here is at my band practices. And when you're playing with a band, it's always a little catch as catch can what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, so that's a really important thing. You mentioned some embouchure or some air things, and I think generally speaking, you used quite smooth air throughout the Vaughan Williams. And again, I imagine you've put some effort into trying to get your air fast and smooth, which I do really like. I noticed that some of the time when you were slurring down, you stopped your air a little bit. Let me get your music back on. Just an observation. I'll just share your music here. So, oh yeah, and a lot of us would want to do this. In the very last line, the second bar, you have an octave leap from the high C all the way down to low C.
Right.
Right. So a lot of fingers are coming down. Sometimes that just even feels tricky. And one of the things I always encourage people to, first of all, Thank you for recording yourself. I want to say to everybody here, if you're not recording yourself regularly, you should be, because we get feedback from watching a recording that we just don't get any other way. So a little bit, you had this kind of effect. There's just like a tiny bit of space. Sometimes, and this could be a very outdated, this could be long ago. Maybe when you first started playing that, your fingers weren't very good. So you sort of gotta, and part of your brain, like an unconscious part of your brain goes, oh my, that doesn't sound good. I'm going to just disguise it. If I stop blowing, nobody will notice my fingers are sloppy, right? And then we program this break in our air. It's an unconscious thing. And so when you listen to it, you hear it. Then you can practice with air full out, and then you might hear sloppy fingers. But if you do, then you can identify what fingers off. So let's try that interval. High C down to the octave below. Keep your air going, and let's just see if we can get it to come out smoothly.
Oh, that wasn't the whole way down, though, was it? That was only part way down.
I want to interrupt you just for a moment. In fact, I didn't have this set myself, so apologies, because I might not have sounded great on Zoom. There's something called original sound. Are you on a computer?
Yeah.
Can you, if you hover your mouse over the Zoom window, on the top left, does it say original sound for musicians on?
I don't see anything like that.
Okay. So let's try this. It'll help me hear you live, because on my end, Zoom was cutting your sound out. So do you see where you have the little microphone in the bottom left, where you would normally mute yourself? Is there a little up arrow beside that you can click?
Yeah, there is.
Okay. Can you, at the bottom of that, can you open up audio settings?
Oh my goodness. Learning all sorts of things about Zoom.
Zoom things. And did that bring up another window?
Yeah. Yeah.
You see, on mine, it's under audio profile. You can click a button that says original sound for musicians.
Yep.
Click on that. And if you have high fidelity music mode, click on that. That's even better. Depends on your computer.
Yeah, well, it's got the there. I don't know whether it's
okay, check it if you have it.
Yeah.
And then you can close that window. And now you still need to kind of go back to where you see our faces. In the upper left corner, you might see words saying original sound for musicians.
Yep.
And if
it says off.
Okay, so click on that box and turn it on. If you just sort of click where it says original sound, it usually toggles it to on. So right where the words are.
Yep, now it's on.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So there's a mini lesson for everyone if you're on Zoom. It's how Zoom's optimized for voice, and the clarinet is so loud it will try and mute you. So can you do that same interval for me? C down to C, and I'll hear you better now.
Oh.
Nice. Yeah. So your fingers are pretty good. So you really don't need to stop your air on that interval, but you do it unconsciously. So that's just something to notice. Okay, I do want to experiment something with you that, will not only help your high notes, but maybe your tone. This might just be because of how you're recording or how you're looking at your device.
Yeah, I don't have any fancy microphones or anything.
Yeah, no worries. I noticed both in you playing live now and your recording, you tend to look down when you play.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of us do that. It's just a sort of unconscious habit. That angle that we blow the air, onto the reed and into the mouthpiece actually affects our tone quite a bit. If I just take what we want is the way your head is right now when you're talking. We're naturally looking forward. And again, if you're just joining us, make sure you're muted if you're not Eileen.
That was not Eileen.
No, I know. That's why I'm asking just whoever it is. So listen to what happens, Eileen, to my sound. I'll use that high C again because it's such a reactable note. Reactive when I move my head down. I lose some of the temp. So can we do this? I want to do like a before and after with you. Let's start with your C, the clarion C, all your fingers down, just like slurring up to high C. A scale, do it your normal way. stop, and then try and lift your head up. It might help if you're looking up at something on the ceiling, and do the exact same thing again. Let's see if we hear a difference.
I don't know. It's
Do you hear any difference in your space? I'm just curious.
I wasn't really, but it probably was, old ears.
No, no, no. We're going to add one other thing that I forgot to
Okay.
mention. So let me make myself bigger so hopefully you can see me demonstrate this. So I want you to try and keep your clarinet at the same angle. So if we're looking down and we just lift up and it feels the same, although that can help, I actually want to see what happens if we're
If you
slightly
move the
changing.
clarinet.
So you know what? Even if you just do the top four notes. So
Okay.
here's your head down, head up. Now bad things might happen or good things might happen. It's an experiment. Let's see what happens.
Uh,
Yeah, how did that? Now, to me, the second one sounded more focused. You're
yeah,
kind of in the hot seat, you're on the
yeah.
spot, so I don't know if you're hearing it, but what did you perceive at your end?
It sounded a little bit better the second time.
Yeah, sometimes when we lift our head up, it pushes the reed against our jaw and we squeak or something, so we have to kind of open our mouth wider. But I think just looking at you, the angle you're using, you're more likely to get that squawky undertone before notes and more likely to play flat. And if you can get your
Okay,
head up
good.
pulling, I
Yeah.
think you're going to get better sound on there. And the only other thing that I wrote down is I think the angle will take care of it, but there were times where your reed sounded like just like it's edging onto the soft bit. Not hugely, but is this a reed you've been playing on for a while? Because reeds get soft.
Well, I had been before I got sick. Had been playing with a three reed, and when I came back, I found that was too hard, and so I moved back to two and a half. So I may be getting at that cusp of where I need to be going back to the three, maybe.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because interesting. I've been contacted from a lot of people lately who have illness or injury and they're away from clarinet and then they come back. And of course, our mouth muscles are a bit weaker, our air is a bit weaker. So we often do need to start a slightly lighter reed. But yeah, your goal is as you get back into it. So it might just be a sign that you're getting back in shape and you might want to be pushing it up.
Mhm.
You can try a three if you try it and it's obviously too
Yeah,
hard.
well, I have them. I have them on hand, but
Yeah. Okay. Well, my guess is you're starting to get back there,
okay.
and
Yeah.
um, I've actually now trained myself to use synthetic reeds. One thing I like about them is they come in quarter sizes, so there's like
Oh,
3/4, but that's another issue. Uh,
yeah.
Eileen, I think you're sounding great overall. Like a lot of the things I look for, you have steady air, you have an awareness of voicing. The biggest thing I think that can make a change is to experiment with the angle of your head and then the angle of the clarinet to find out where you sound best.
Perfect.
And then maybe to be aware that as you're getting back in shape, you might get a little more support from a slightly stiffer reed. But it didn't sound half a strength too soft to me right now. It just like a little bit. So just
Hmm.
kind of be aware of that as you're getting back in shape. Do you have any questions at all?
No, I think that helps a lot.
Hmm.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for playing for us. It was a real pleasure to see you here. I appreciate that. All right. Excellent. So I'm going to just put everyone back on my screen. I know that there are questions there, and at the end, I'm going to answer a bunch of questions. So, again, if you're just joining us, welcome. We're having a master class, which is mini lessons. And I actually am going to go faster. I wanted 3 people a session, and I always like to have a spare, so I have 4 people. Ask yourself as we're doing this, how does this apply to me? So a lot of you, that voicing exercise would be a great one to try when we finish the session. A lot of you record yourself from the side, see if you do look down, how we can deal with that. Um, okay, Mike, if you're on the call, can you unmute yourself? And we're going to take a look at faster fingering stuff. Let me just see if Mike is here. I'm sure there are some mics here. We have like Wow, 177 people on our call. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in from all over the world. Okay, um, I don't see Michael here yet, so he might be having trouble logging in. So, in that case, Gwenda, I believe you're here. Could you unmute yourself and make some noise, and then you'll pop up on my feed?
Hello.
Hello, can you be louder?
Yes, I can.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Gwenda. Thank
Yeah.
you for volunteering. I'll tell you what, I'm going to get your music and your video on screen. Can you kind of share with the group your focus for this piece, what you would like help on, and I will see what I can help you with on that.
Okay. Well, this I've not played this at all. I've played it a couple of times when I wrote into Michelle. So this is very much the start of a new piece for the first time this week, and I've only recorded the first little bit of it. And yes, I think I don't need to tell you all the mistakes. You'll find them as you go. So let's just see how it goes. The whole thing is to learn how to time it and how to get it to sound right. And I also have played it at least half the speed it's meant to go at.
Okay, great. So I just want to, for everybody watching, when we had a bunch of people who volunteered to play for us, which I so appreciate, and I actually, since the pandemic's been going on, we started some online communities where we do master classes like this regularly. Same group of people, every month. It's a great chance for people to learn from each other and be inspired by the growth it has. And I always try and say there are many different things you can bring into a lesson. Certainly, a piece you're working really hard on, you've been performing a lot, and we just fine tune it. But sometimes what Gwenda's done here is said, hey, this is just a piece I'd like to play. I just started it. What are some strategies for working on it? How do we go about it? And sometimes it's nice to get guidance at that stage. So I actually thought this would be helpful for us to do here. So Gwenda, thank you for that. I'm going to play your recording. Just before I do, Michael from the Clarinet Mentors team, can you just double check our email and see if Mike, who is going to play today, might be having trouble logging in, and just double check that so we can include him. Okay, Gwenda, I'm going to play your recording, and I've got your music on screen. This is Summertime, by the way. I cut off the title, and we'll give it a listen. Okay, I hope I didn't cut you off. I think that was the end of your recording, right? Okay, wonderful. Um, so Gwenda, I have lots of strategies for you, but before I give you feedback, is there anything you noticed just listening to this first draft of it that you would want to be focusing on as you prepare this piece?
um, well, some of the fingering got me confused, to be honest. I was getting in a right muddle with the 18 bar 20, the F natural to F sharp with
Yeah.
the triplet. Those two bars. I mean, the timing of that was a nightmare, and how to finger it. So every time I do it, I do it differently. So my fingers are going. Blah, blah, blah. So I don't know about that one. I didn't know how to work that one out, to be honest. I tried a couple of different ways. Um, yeah, that I sounds to me like I really slowed down as well, but I don't think that matters too much at this stage.
Exactly. You're at a working stage of it.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. So let me talk a bit about the process that I use when I'm working on a new piece of music. Maybe compared to how I used to work on pieces of music. And the older I get, the less time I like practicing. I hate to say that because I'm a professional musician, but if I have a piece to learn, I just want to learn it, the technical stuff, as quickly as possible so that I can just have fun playing it. So I've had to develop way less tolerance for mistakes so that as I'm working on something, the moment there's a mistake, I will stop, and it might be the first note, and do some work to kind of reprogram my brain out of that mistake into what's going to work. And that means that in the early stages of a piece, I'm practicing very, very short sections, a few notes or a couple of bars at a time, and really trying to refine it, just little chunks. And there's lots of things that go into listening to a small part of the music. But one of the things I like to do is record myself playing a very short chunk. So if I was working on Summertime, I would probably record from the beginning to this little check mark, the breath mark. So that's the first 4 bars. I'd record it and then listen back. And it's so easy for us to record ourselves these days. For all of you watching, probably whatever you're watching on, you can record. Most smartphones record very well. There's an app I like to use if I'm just in a hurry. It's called Modacity, Modacity, and I think their website is modacity.com. That one is a kind of subscription-based service, but the app does many things that I like. It kind of lets you write in the list of things you're recording on, and it sort of becomes a practice tracker. It tracks your time. So if you're working, let's say your band has a concert and you're working on 6 pieces of music, you put them all in, you can kind of see how long you've worked on each piece, and you might notice what you're neglecting. But part of the reason I like using it for my music is it will record. If I set it on my stand, there's a record button. It will record my clarinet sound really well. The basic, voice memo on my phone, clarinet tends to overload it, so it's kind of optimized for instruments. So it's just handy. I hit record. The instant I finish playing my 4 bars, it plays it back for me. It can also show me the spectrograph of what my sound is doing, which when I get into really geeky analysis I use. But anyway, long and short of it is, however you do it, I would record it, listen back, and then there's, each time I practice a section, I would have a different focus at first. So let's say I'm working on the first 4 bars. First thing I might say when I listen back is, oh, rhythm's all over the place. That's something you mentioned, Gwenda. When you started, especially because this piece started with more of the main melody, as you're probably familiar with it, and then whoever arranged this kind of jazzed it up, and the rhythm got harder and the notes got harder. That's where you started to lose the rhythm. But at first, your sense of pulse was really good, almost like you had a metronome going. So you have a really good internal pulse, but some of the time you weren't quite counting the note lengths that are written there, right? Yeah. So I would probably turn on a metronome, and the Modacity app has a metronome you can record with. And sometimes I'll just sing it to myself. And there's different languages for counting. If you don't have languages for counting rhythm, I have some YouTube videos on that. And in fact, I'm inviting Josh Gu to do a workshop. He's doing a workshop a week from today on rhythm. And I'll send out a link to all of you actually about that. He has some good rhythm counting systems as well. But I like to tap on my body, and I might just kind of go 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3. Whatever your system is, right? There I'm using 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Singing it, doesn't matter if you're out of tune, but first I would just figure out the rhythm without my clarinet. Then I'd record it, see if the rhythm is good. Gwenda, let me ask you, what's your system for figuring out rhythm?
Yeah, I tend to write it in.
Great.
I've actually been doing a rhythm thing with Josh recently, and I find it helpful to actually write it in so that I can see what it is. I tend to do it in quavers.
Great. Yeah, I love doing that too. So sometimes I'll just draw like a line where the pulse is, where the beat would fall. Sometimes
Yeah,
just doing that is really helpful.
yeah,
Other times people will write in their counting system. They'll actually write the beat numbers for and one, whatever it is, right? So writing in is very helpful as we're learning a piece.
yeah.
Um,
Because I haven't done that. I haven't had time to do that yet. But yeah, I mean, I photoed it before I even thought about anything else. So, but yes, that would be one of my first things would be to write in some of the counting.
yeah. So typically when I'm recording myself, I record, I listen back. By the way, I'm encouraging all of you to record yourselves. If you're not used to doing that, let me just prepare you for the usual reaction the first time we record ourselves is we listen back and our brain goes, oh, yuck. Oh, that sounds awful. That sounds awful. That sounds awful. This is typically how we react to our own recordings. And I still have that at times, but I've really trained myself to, this especially works well when we're just recording a short thing, is to just find one thing you want to fix, work on that little thing, re-record it, and see if you fix that thing. Then you can kind of go check, and then you find another thing you want to fix. You work on it, you record it. In this way, by the time we've taken those 4 bars and worked on rhythm one time and tone the next time, and maybe, oh, my fingers were really sloppy here, and I work on that interval, we usually get a recording that we feel pretty good about. And it speeds up the process for us. And if we do this to the first 4 bars of the piece, I find my brain starts to go into the mode of that piece. Like, oh, I'm starting to get a sense of swing rhythms. Oh, I'm starting to get a sense of the tone I want to use in this piece and the articulation I want to use. And then it becomes easier to do the next 4 bars. So don't be hard on yourself when you hear your flaws. Really reframe it as an opportunity to fix that one thing. Yeah, it's easy to overload our brain if we're thinking, I have to fix my tone and my rhythm and my tonguing and my fingers. Blah, blah. Then we just go into overload. So one thing at a time. Um, all right. Gwenda, just some things about this piece. This version is swing style, right? So jazzy, looks like there's a jazzy accompaniment that you could play along with, which might be fun if you're able
There
to
is a
do that.
CD that goes with this. Yes, yeah,
Great. Yeah. And it's always that helps with rhythm too to have a CD to play along with.
yeah,
In jazz, when we see staccato, like in bar 6 on the first note, staccato in jazz is longer. So I think you're a little bit too classical on that. So jazz is more the the. We kind of release it with our breath. So if I were just playing those first 2 bars, which there's 2 staccato notes in measure 6, so my staccato is more like tossing it up. Bop, bop. So usually we have a slight crescendo and it tosses up. Same thing in 10. So that's just an articulation style that you could practice. Yeah, you mentioned the fingering going into 2120 here. So we have F naturals and F sharps, which often we would do using that chromatic fingering.
yes,
But then slurring from the chromatic to the D for a lot of people, that's really awkward. So
yeah,
you kind of have to, I think you're right when you said that always throws you off. Whenever we have something that always throws us off, it's like a brain freeze, a mental block. Ah, what do I do there? We need to take that section and practice it. So first of all, you would decide. So for me, I would have 2 options here. Either I would say, well, can I slur down from the alternate fingering? Let me make myself bigger. I've kind of trained my fingers to do that pretty well, but I don't recommend it for most people. I'm pretty good at sliding down, but in that particular case, you slurred up from F to F sharp. So I would use this alternate chromatic fingering. I'm demonstrating it in case some of you don't even know about it. Then that F sharp repeated tongued. When we're tonguing, that brief moment that we're tonguing, we can disguise finger slips. You might consider switching with a regular F sharp on that spot, and then it's easier to slow down. So it would look like this. So you kind of do the switch there. That's something a lot of people would do. So you kind of have to experiment with what option is going to be best for me. Whatever you pick, it's going to be a little awkward because it's not an easy fingering spot, right? So you just have to decide what's least awkward for your fingers. Yeah. But then once you decide, you need to kind of repeat that little da-da-da-dum-da-da. You need to repeat it like 6, 7, 8 times until it starts to feel really easy. And that only takes 30 seconds to repeat 2 bars 7 times. It starts to feel really easy and automatic. And then you're not going to have that, what am I going to do? That sort of brain freeze that goes on. So one of the things I do when I'm first learning a piece, I scan through it and I mark the hard fingering bits. Okay. And if Mike joins us, he was going to talk about hard fingering because I was going to go more into that. So if he does, I'll save some of those. And Gwenda, you could take note when Mike's on that we'll do that. Yeah. But I just practice the finger patterns to get those easier so that then when I go back and really start working on the piece, I don't have these spots that are just like, oh, I can't play it, right? I like to start with some of the technical stuff and get it feeling easier so psychologically I feel a little better about it. All right, as you were playing, like I said, you have a good sense of pulse. You obviously have great musical ideas, so I think this is going to be a really good piece for you. I hear a little bit in your tone, a little bit of kind of like background fuzz, right? This is really common. And first of all, sometimes we get that if we just get water stuck behind the reed, right? And that may have been going on in your recording. So you can just vacuum, right? Make sure you vacuum regularly when you hear it. But we also get that if some of our air is moving kind of slowly through the instrument and it's making that a hissing sound. So usually this happens when we're softer. Like 100% hiss would be this. Kind of half hiss, half tone might be this. Like you probably hear a lot of airiness in my tone. Yeah. What I hear is just a little bit of that in your sound. Okay. It's just a little bit of air that's not moving efficiently enough. And what I would encourage you to do overall is get your air moving faster. And there's lots of air exercises that do that, but imagine if we could just hear your air. And sometimes I'll hold my hand up in front of my face. All of you at home can do this. I'll try and blow a cold air stream into a little spot on my face because slower air will tend to cover a wide area. That slow warm air is what gives us an airy tone. Imagine we have a spray valve built into our body and we're focusing it for that super small, faster stream. That's what gets the reed vibrating like crazy, makes our tone resonant, makes soft notes sound as nice tone-wise as loud notes. Most of us have no fuzz when we're playing loudly. But when we play softly, we get that fuzz there, and that's usually about air. So the less air we use, the faster it has to move. So it becomes like you've blown up a balloon, you're pinching it shut, and you just open it a little bit, you get that fast air. So can we try something, Gwenda? Yeah. Hopefully you've got your original sound on and all of that stuff. Can you just take your open G, like the G with no holes covered, just play it with loudly with the world's greatest tone. Good. So when you're thinking about that, you've got really nice fast air. I'm loving how it's sounding. Can you try gradually getting softer? And if you hear any airiness come in, just try and speed your air up a little bit. Yeah, So I loved how you got softer, it fuzzed out, you increased your air. Usually temporarily we get louder, but then you were able to go softer before it fuzzed out again, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's one example of, a long tone exercise. There's lots of them out there. Um, that I think you could keep going. Sometimes when we're tentative on a piece, like we're kind of new, we tend to tentatively let our air go down. And I think you don't want to be in the habit of doing that because you have great tone when you're using your air properly. So, again, maybe recording short sections as you're learning it. One of the things you'd focus on is just, okay, can I really get my air strong and fast so that
yeah.
it's
That's
moving
great.
through there?
Yeah, it's really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, on that recording. Oh, the other thing that can cause a little bit of fuzzy sound. Are you on cane reeds or synthetic reeds?
Synthetic.
Okay, great. Yeah. Um, I was gonna say sometimes a cane reed, if we've used it a while, it will warp. As it gets wet, dry, and then a reed that sounded great yesterday will be kind of airy and fuzzy. And then there's ways to flatten the back and make it work. But yours, that wouldn't be the case for yours. Yeah, what
No.
you just played live sounded good. It almost sounded, yeah, like something was funny with it on the recording.
Right. Yeah. It maybe it's the way I recorded it on an iPad, and I was having trouble with the sound, but it's the first time I've actually succeeded in making a recording and getting it to you.
Oh
So
no, good for you. It was great. I mean, for what we're doing here, the recording was fine because it showed lots of good habits, and I more sort of wanted to take the approach of like how do we approach learning the piece. So for you, the only real swing thing I had was make the staccato a bit longer. You've got the rhythmic pulse for swing already sounding great. Um,
okay.
just that your air at times could be faster, and then I really encourage you to just now work on it short sections and really get each section down, and then play along with the recording because that'll be fun too.
Yes.
um,
Yeah. That's my plan, so that I will be able to play it with the recording. Then I can use it a bit later in the year if I get the opportunity to do a little, you know, concerty thing with friends and things. So that was kind of my aim, really. Yeah.
okay, fabulous. Does that give you some strategies for kind of moving forward on this piece?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for sending that in on short notice, and that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So we could do a whole session on like how do we learn a new piece of music with lots more detail and depth, but we have we have limited time and lots of people, so I'm going to carry on for today. Um, Tom Donio, I know you're on the call. Do you want to unmute yourself and maybe share with the group what you're working on today, and what you'd like help with too?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. It sounds good.
Okay, wonderful. I'm just playing band music, music that I play in a pops group, and so there's a piece that we're playing. Actually, Victory at Sea, one of my favorite pieces, and and so I'm working on the clarinet section. The sort of march, 6/8 march. I think it's 6/8. Yeah, 6/8 march. So anyway.
Great. So let's do this, Tom.
Yes.
I have your page 1 and page 2. You're going to play live for us.
Actually, page 2 and 3. I sent a page 3.
Oh, okay. So I have one that starts at bar 118. Is that page 2 or 3?
That's actually 3. That's page 2 starts at the top is 57, but I'm going to start at the pickup to 94.
Oh, okay. I got it. Great. Okay. Let me get this on screen for everyone to see them. I do have it here. And then I'll try and switch to page 3 as you get there. Okay. I believe I have it. You're starting where it says solely there.
Correct.
Okay. Fabulous. Well, let's hear it.
Okay.
Okay, nice job. Very nice job. So, I love it when people bring in band music. So I'm sure many of you on the call do play in bands, and we get pieces that have challenges. What are you noticing, Tom, that you would like to improve on this one?
Stopping squeaking.
Now, is that a normal thing, or is that enhanced because you're like playing live in front of a couple hundred clarinetists?
Well, actually, kind of both. When I played it last week for the first time, I'm not the greatest reader, but I think not everyone was kind of playing. I thought they weren't playing loud enough, so I was trying to overcompensate, and I was squeaking.
Okay.
Although I'm the only one, I guess, that think internalizes it, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, but I think now, yes, I'm also having the light in this room is not good at all. So and my eyes are a little on the blurry side, but I played it enough. I should have it memorized by now.
Okay. So, you know what? Let's talk about the squeaking thing.
Yes.
What do you think is causing the squeaks?
Um, I would say a combination. It might be part fingers, part perhaps not overblowing exactly. I would call it voicing, because how I'm the mouth, actually the embouchure is on the mouthpiece. I mean, that would be part of it. Also the air. If the air gets a sudden push to it, it'll also. So I think the combination of the three things.
Yeah, I'm going to make myself bigger here. I think everything you're saying are the kind of conditions where we tend to squeak. For most of you watching this call, like if you're a total beginner, we often squeak because our fingers aren't covering the holes all the way, and as you're more experienced, as Tom is, it's rare that our fingers don't cover the holes, but they might if we have like a big finger leap or a really awkward fingering. So, not to rule fingers out, but for most of you, it's caused by our jaw biting the reed. And, sometimes someone will say, oh, you're overblowing it. Well, sometimes when we're putting in like too much air, it's because we're going, gosh, no one can hear the clarinets. Okay, I'm going to carry the section. Boom, honk. And that enthusiasm puts tension in us. Just like we blow hard, we also bite at the same time. So I don't think it's the excess of air that causes it. It's the thing that goes with it, which is we kind of tense our jaw up and it squeaks a bit. So I noticed that often you would, if I heard squeaks, and it wasn't that bad at all, Tom. You'll hear the recording and go, oh yeah, there wasn't that much squeaking. But when you were leaping up, so there was, for example, a leap from open G to the octave above it, where I did hear the squeak. Often when we see a big leap up, again, I think our unconscious brain creates habits. Part of us goes, uh-oh, and then that causes that little bit of tension. So I like
That's not nice.
Oops, my watch. My watch just said that's not nice. I agree. We don't want tension. It's not nice. So thank you, watch. We want it to. I will practice that interval with a focus on trying not to bite. So the counter to biting is to really have the whole frame of our face going rounder. And you mentioned embouchure, Tom. You have a good embouchure. You're obviously aware of it. But sometimes I'll just take that leap, really trying to keep it solid here. Just And even when I'm doing that, I can feel that I want to tighten up on the high G. So it's like I'm willing myself not to. Can you try that interval? Just G's in octaves, thinking of corners in. Good. This would be a good one for you to record yourself in profile as you were just playing, because I still see things changing a bit. And we don't really need physical things to change in our embouchure when we're doing that interval. So you could get information from it, record yourself, notice what's changing. Your tongue is moving maybe more than it should be. So let's try something. This when we're doing a march and there's lots of tonguing, sometimes our tongue, and this is a little bit on a tangent from squeaking, but we want our tongue overall to move as lightly as possible. And in our masterclass next weekend, some people are bringing tonguing stuff in, so I'm going to go a lot deeper on articulation next session, which you're all invited to. But we want our tongue to move as little as possible. When we have a vigorous piece, sometimes we tend to move it a lot, and if our tongue's moving a lot, our jaw gets in on it. So while you're trying this, Tom, think about your tongue like barely moving. I don't think I can. Well, maybe if I rest my clarinet on my knee. Yeah. Try those octaves. Da, dee, dee, dee. Barely moving your tongue. Yeah. It's better. And you almost seem to have more freedom that way too, right? So the less excess movement we have, the more reliable our tone is going to be. We're going to keep the voicing in better position. And I think our jaw tends to stay more stable if it doesn't sense a lot of movement going on our neighbor, which is the tongue to the jaw. So having your tongue move less is going to help a little bit there too. Other than that, like, you're a very good musician. You got a great sense of pulse. I love it that there was like a 2-bar rest and you were actually singing the whatever the other rest of the band is doing. It's great when we know a piece so well that we're hearing the accompaniment in our head. That's a really good sign of knowing the piece. I'm going to put your music back on. I thought there were times where the articulation might have been just a wee bit heavy. And it's probably related to what we were just talking about, the tongue moving too much and hitting the reed. I'm being really picky with you because it was quite good how you played it.
I everything that you say, I've thought.
Okay.
No, seriously. I mean, I do have a heavy tongue.
Okay.
Like a heavy feet, heavy tongue.
Yeah. So what you were just doing when you took those octave intervals and you were thinking of moving your tongue less, your tonguing sounded great. So, like so many bad habits that creep into our playing, our body likes to do everything the same way. So if we're playing louder, we think more air, we tend to also slap our fingers and hammer our tongue. But there's times where we might want our tongue to really hit the reed if we want a particularly strong accent, but most of us hammer the reed too much, like all the time. Most of us could benefit from some work to get a lighter tongue going. So
I think that issue carries also into the altissimo as well.
for sure.
And so I've always had a difficulty or challenge to keep the air going and not keep it going with the tongue, if you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely. So here's a good exercise for you. When I'm isolating, say, just tonguing, I just like to start on open G because it's an easy note. Everybody knows how to play open G. For most of us, it's the first note we ever played because we stuck a clarinet in our mouth and blew, and there was a note. To just do like legato, legato tonguing, but to go from kind of crescendo over the course of 8 or 9 notes, from soft to very loud. And you'll notice as you get louder, your tongue wants to start hammering. So in this context of I'm just playing one note, you really want to pay attention to that and keep your tongue just as light. When we're doing it softly, our body's in, easy mode. We tend to be light. So here's what we tend to do. Just so everyone watching can hear this. Here's the bad habit we instinctively do. know, we start just pounding it as we get louder. So here's what we want to do. I find that really challenging. As I get louder, I want to start hammering. So Tom, can you try what I just did?
Yes.
You don't have to wave your fingers around, but good. And Zoom's interfering with your sound a little bit there, but let me ask you, did that feel challenging as you got louder to stay light? Or was it-
Actually, no. Should I do it again?
no, no. It's good. Now let's try it an octave higher. Same thing. Okay, good. And again, I'm having trouble hearing you, but you can hear yourself. Was that as easy as Open G for you?
Why are you having trouble hearing me? Am I not, is something going on, or is something not working?
It's just Zoom. It's Zoom. Your clarinet's so loud, it's trying to quiet you down. So nothing you're doing.
Okay.
I don't know if your original sound is on. It's that same issue.
It's supposed to be.
Okay, no worries. I'm not going to worry about it. So
Okay.
anyway, that's a great exercise. If you can do that and it feels really easy, then so the way we gradually increase difficulties and we try it on higher notes, then you could do that on altissimo notes, right? And just,
Yes.
it's fairly easy when we're sustaining one note to give it our attention, but for many of you, when you first try this exercise, it's hard, and that starts to get you that awareness of, I can play loudly with a gentle tongue. Then, Tom, let's add the next and more advanced variation for you, which is now we do it staccato. So how about take your Open G, doot, 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 again, soft to loud, and see if when you're doing staccato, you can still do it with a very light touch on the reed.
But not stop air, correct?
If you're comfortable doing stop tongue, do stop tongue. So
Stop tongue?
maybe doot, 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 maybe something like that. Okay, great. I want you to watch the replay of this, which I'm going to have up later today. I'm doing another session after this with Transformation Community, so it won't be up for a few hours after we're done. But you moved your whole head and shoulders when you were doing that exercise, which you didn't when you were playing long notes. So let me make myself bigger so you can see this. And again, I'm being really picky with you, but this is what we want to do. So when you were doing the legato, you look so relaxed. On this one, it was sort of like there was, I'm overdoing it a bit, but you had a little bit of that tension going on, and your tongue sounded heavier.
Okay.
So one of your goals is, can you play staccato, barely moving your tongue? Loud and soft. And when we get that lightness there, it makes articulation easier. So much better, Tom. Yeah, and now you're not moving at all, and you're making it seem really easy. If you were to bring that ease into your music, it would just flow better. You would have less squeaking. How about just play the first 4 or 8 bars again? I'm not even going to put your music up. I want you to have that same feeling. Great. Let's pause there. That has a beautiful, light, effortless sound. I mean, you sounded great before, but to me, you just give the impression it's even easier now. And I really like how it's flowing. Yeah. Is that helpful? Does that give you some things to
Would that
do?
be loud enough in a group?
Well, a little hard for me to tell for Zoom, but I'm guessing it would, especially because that section starts softly and you get louder and louder, right?
Right, and it's solely, which is all the clarinets.
Yeah,
Okay.
so no, I'm sure that probably would be fine. You know, you always have to listen to the room, hear it in context, but
Right.
so be aware of not just you, but everyone, our tendency to hammer when we're short and hammer more when we get louder.
And it comes with the fingers as well. Hammer with the
Absolutely.
fingers.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes I'll just take a short, on that note, like a short finger pattern, and also go from soft to loud. And so let me illustrate that. Let's say I was just even going,
Movement,
just doing like a couple notes like this. Here's what my fingers tend to do as I get louder. You know, they get more hammery as we go. So again, I'll take a pattern, do it lightly. Sometimes I'll do it without even playing my clarinet at first, so that my fingers are light, and then I'll do it crescendoing, you know, with that same awareness. So we really have to train our body not to have excess tension, inadvertent tension. Yeah. Tom, I think you're sounding great. Do you have any questions at all?
No, I mean, you've been very, very clear. And that's, I mean, you've confirmed things that I have been intuiting, and what I want to do is bring it more to a greater conscious level.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? To notice our unconscious bad habits and fix them. But I think you should be recording yourself, because some of the stuff I visually observed, you would see if you were watching yourself
Okay.
on screen. Yeah, great. Thank you, Tom. And
I'm not sure I know how to record myself. I guess each computer has a record button or something.
Yeah, and like
Oh, I see. It's what do you do it on Zoom, or do you?
you could totally just do it on Zoom.
Okay,
You could
gotcha.
start a Zoom meeting with you being the only participant, hit record. I mean, there's other ways that probably would give you better audio, and that's unique to, you know, the operating system you're using there.
Okay.
But that would do it. You
That's
know,
what I have to figure out as to the mechanics,
yeah.
technology.
If you have a smartphone that's, you know, built in the last 5 years, the built-in video is quite good.
Actually, this is the first time with one of these sessions that I'm actually sitting at my computer, my laptop.
Oh,
and
great.
and so normally I would use the smartphone, but the smartphone has been disappointing in terms of sound and what have you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So in that case, I think for our live session, your computer did a better job. I like that. I could hear you better. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
I
Michelle.
appreciate that.
Let
Okay.
me mute myself.
Great. Okay. And Michael, I see you joined us. If you can make some noise and unmute yourself. Michael Plout, who is also going to play for us. If you can find your unmute button, make some noise. I would love to hear your piece. Uh-oh, I think he just disappeared. There's a downside to technology. Okay, I'm going to see if Michael comes back. He might have been trying to unmute himself and accidentally booted himself out of the meeting. So meanwhile, I'll keep an eye out for Michael, and maybe Michael from the Clarinet Mentors team, if you can keep an eye out for Michael on the participants list, let me know. When
I'm here, Michelle.
Oh, you're there. Oh, thanks, Michael. You disappeared for me. I'm glad you're here. Welcome. Great to see you.
Took me 50 minutes, but I finally made it.
Yay. Oh, thank you so much. Okay. So, Michael, you came to us talking about wanting to make your fingers move faster, right? Do you want to introduce to the group kind of your hopes for this? And I'm going to give you some suggestions that we can all work on. So,
well, it's just something I've always had a problem with. And as I told you, when I started playing again after 48 years in 2007, my teacher at the time told me I'd never be able to play fast. So he just decided that based on having worked with me, so I do what I can.
Yeah, and so one thing I always like to experiment with is what I call limiting beliefs. You know, like someone saying, "Oh, you're never going to play any faster." That may not be true. You know, on the other hand, it may be true that I will never be a champion Olympic diver since I've never had diving lessons, and I'm probably a little older than, you know, the Olympic champ. So certainly there are some limits that are real, but for many of us, we do have beliefs like, I just don't have a good sense of rhythm. Oh, I'm never going to sound good at this. Oh, I'm never going to do that. Many of our limiting clarinet beliefs are not necessarily true. There are still often many strategies we haven't yet discovered that could make a difference. So So Michael, that's Mike. I like that's why when you brought it in, you're a good player. Are there things you could do to play faster? I kind of think there is. Unless you have some really limited finger mobility due to injury or arthritis or something, which I don't think you do. I think there are things we could do to get your fingers faster, and that's some of the stuff that I want to explore.
Yeah, part of it is fingers, but part of it is reading the music accurately. And there are times now when I may have to write notes music to remind myself of an accidental that I just tend to miss all the time.
Okay, fabulous. So, Mike, one of the things that's going on is your audio is cutting in and out, and that could mean a bad internet connection. So,
Okay.
there were lots of things I wanted you to try playing, which we'll try and do. But if the audio is not working well, then I may do more demonstrating of the techniques and kind of give it to you as homework. So we'll just see how audio goes. Do you have your original sound on? Can we just double check that?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So it might just be the internet connection then, and unless it was just me, but your sound is cutting in and out a little bit. Okay, so I asked Mike to just like pick something short that represented fast fingering that we could use as our sample, and then have him play it live in our session, and we'll see if we can do some things to get it even faster. So, Mike, let me get your video on. You just prepared, I think it was just a little arpeggio, right? Do you remember what key you were in?
Yeah, it was in the key of G.
Key of G. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So,
This was an exercise from it's an exercise from
oh, the Alberts. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great scale book.
okay, so this is on page 30.
Okay, so if anyone has that book, they can watch it. Let's give this. So, Mike, I assume here you're playing it at, one of your fastest, sort of comfortable speeds. Good. So it sounds like at that tempo, it's pretty, pretty fluent, pretty competent. Sounds quite nice. So I'm going to just share with the group at large and then get you to experiment with some things, like some of my thoughts on things that help us develop faster fingers. I think that some of it is what we do physically with our hands, and that's about when we're preparing and trying to make things go faster. What we consciously do with our hands and fingers is about 20% of it, and about 80% of it is our unconscious brain. And our unconscious brain can help us play brilliantly well and fast, and it can really hold us up. And so the older I get, the more I experiment with sometimes strange and alternate ways of practicing that help my brain learn things better. And I share them freely with my students because I see them getting great results from it. So let's just look at the physical stuff first. Anytime we start hammering, it will slow us down. So one of the things that we can control and work on is training our fingers to hover over their main holes all of the time so that we don't lift our fingers too much. And we also want our fingers, if you just kind of made a little Pac-Man, like a little finger puppet, this is the shape that our hands naturally work best. Notice my fingers are arched and rounded. Yet a lot of us, when we play, get this kind of shape. We're squeezing so hard, our first knuckle is curved in, and that's going to slow you down. You try moving your fingers fast in that shape, that just hurt my hand compared to arched and rounded. So if I were to play, let's say, a low G, all the holes covered, I should see that roundedness, but I'm not squeezing. Just minimum tension to play it. Open G, where all the holes are uncovered, should look not much different. So great exercise, stand in front of a mirror or a screen where you can see yourself. Go between low G and open G, where your fingers, if I was a flute player, move about this much. They have to lift off the hole enough that we're not muffling the sound, but we usually move them way too much. you see, I'm not moving them much and I'm moving them very gently. That's a great little exercise to start increasing awareness of what do I want to do with my fingers? What do I want to have happen here? And then try different intervals. Maybe maybe I would do, ba da dee da dee da dee da, kind of work my way down a scale, but again, looking in a mirror, noticing which fingers really like to fly. Our left hand especially likes to fly. Now, Mike, your fingers were pretty good, but they're moving a little more than they could. So you might take the first three notes, G, B, D. Maybe notice and make a loop out of them. Maybe your fingers like to do this. Maybe they're moving a bit too much. So then what I do sometimes is I hold my clarinet where I can just see maybe I don't have a mirror in front of me where I can see my fingers, and I just finger that pattern. So Mike, can you pick up your clarinet? Can you see what I'm doing? I'm fingering G, B, D, D, do, do, D, da. I'm just looking at my fingers and trying to get it more gentle. And once that feels really good, like, oh yeah, they're barely moving, they're nice and light, then play it and gradually let it speed up. So start with just noticing your fingers. Good. And unfortunately, Zoom's cutting out your sound, but does that feel more relaxed than what you would normally do with your fingers? Or is that feel similar to what you normally do? I'm just curious.
Yeah, probably too soon to tell.
Okay.
Except I'm focusing on that, so that helps too.
Okay. And you know what? Like, if you do this for 10 seconds, sadly, it's not going to miraculously fix your right hand for life. So it's more just, it starts to get us aware of it, and then we play it, and then we check it again, then we play it. And the goal is we're kind of gradually bringing more ease into it. So that's one thing. And in the case of your arpeggio, you could start with just the first two notes. And then you might do the next two. The goal is just like, oh, it feels easy. And when it starts to feel really easy, sometimes then I'll speed that up. So for those two notes, maybe I can get them so they're almost like a trill. And somehow that feels kind of easy for my brain. There's no psychological break. And then I do the next two, and then I might do three notes.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, they get tangled up or my brain goes, and then it stops. But a lot of the times it's part of our brain going, can't do that. That stops us. And so if we can do two notes fast, that's pretty good. Then we do the next two notes fast. That's pretty good. But getting the not moving much and relaxation is an important physical habit for finger speed. Then beyond that, there's all kinds of different ways to practice it that will help us. And Mike, I know you're sitting right now, and a lot of us sit when we play. If you're able to stand and play, those of you who are, it doesn't matter whether we're sitting or standing, there's things we can add. It's the tension when we're trying to play fast that comes into our fingers and our jaw that makes it harder. So sometimes we need to do something unusual that shakes our brain out of its usual patterns. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that could be physical movement. And again, this is just a practice strategy. I wouldn't perform like this. But let's say I'm playing that arpeggio and I feel like I've reached my limit. Then I'm going to try something weird like this. Can I play it while I'm swaying back and forth? And part of my brain's going to be going, what are you doing? This is not clarinet playing, right? And sometimes just that distraction, all of a sudden I can play it better. It's very weird how this works. So, I was at a master class where someone was playing something and the instructor said, stop, stand on one foot, play it again. And they played it perfectly. And then the teacher said, is it because you're standing on one foot that your fingers are moving better? And he's like, I don't know. And of course it's not. It's just shaking up our pattern. So if you're sitting, you can spin a bit. You can just do something. Or if you're able to lift a foot up and down while you're sitting, just do something weird. So, Mike, I know we can't even see you, but try, how about just pick the beginning of the arpeggio, a little pattern, 4 to 5 notes that you can repeat. While you're repeating it, do something weird and try and go faster and faster. And I'm just curious to see if it helps. We're just experimenting. You want to try that right now? So do about 4 notes, repeat it, and then try it with some, whether we can see whatever you're doing or not. It's certainly fun to watch. So did that feel any freer? Did that shake anything up? Or does it feel just kind of the same? Like we're just experimenting.
Yeah, it does. Does relieve the tension a little bit.
Okay, good. So that's another like tool in the toolbox to use, right? We're just kind of talking about things that we can try. The other real practical thing that many musicians on many instruments recommend is to take a fast passage and practice it in different rhythms. Is that something that you work with?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a name we used to call that. What is it called? I'll have to think of it. But one of my clarinet teachers had a name for doing that.
Okay, great. Well, it's something we know about and often forget. So there are, for any of you, if you were just to Google, it doesn't matter.
I remember. She
Yeah.
called it funky rhythms.
Funky rhythms. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. You know, if you were just to Google, like, playing music faster, you're going to find, it doesn't matter if it's a piano teacher, trumpet teacher, whatever they suggest, we can totally learn from on clarinet. Again, it's a way of slightly shaking up our brain more than anything. But so a real simple one that I like to work with people is, so let's say the notes are supposed to be even. Do 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 da do do dee da dee do do da. We change the rhythm to, we're going to slow the tempo down so that it's like so easy. My brain is going to be going, oh, this is simple. Like I want to feel at ease with it. I change it to a long, short rhythm. So the first time I do it, I might just do it kind of jazzy. Right? Whatever speed feels easy, where there's no chance you're going to have a wrong note. So my beat is quite slow. But then I'm going to repeat it a few times. I'm never going to speed it up. But each time I repeat it, the long note gets longer, and that makes the short note shorter. So let me do 3 or 4. I'll just do a very short bit of it so you get the sense of what I'm talking about. By the last time, I'm almost grace noting them. That kind of effect, right? And what that's doing is I'm still feeling relaxed and at ease, so I'm not bringing this unusual tension in. My brain, the unconscious part of my brain is going, oh yeah, it's pretty easy actually, because I want my brain to think it's easy. But I'm moving to the notes really quickly. Ta-dum. Then we flip the rhythm, short, long, same idea. So you kind of have to do each pattern long, short, then short, long, maybe 5 times. And again, relatively short section. Then when we just try and put it together, my brain is now going, oh, it's kind of easier. Often people are shocked at what comes out. So there's all kinds of other rhythm patterns that work in combination together, but that's a simple one to sort of throw out there. Another favorite of mine is if it's just a passage up on a page, maybe it's a bar of going up some weird arpeggio, sometimes start at the very end, do the last 2 notes, ba-dum, and then do the last 3 notes, da-da-dum, and then the last 4 notes, ba-da-da. It's another way of playing the right notes and shaking up our brain a little bit to be playing something different from what's there. So Mike, for you know, you're a good player. Just when I watched your video, I feel like you already have pretty nice hand shape, but your fingers move a little more than is ideal. So some of those exercises on getting them to move less and to be more gentle and more relaxed will help. But just anytime, you know, you have a band piece and there's a section with fast notes, really shake up how you practice it. sometimes getting our body to move in weird ways, definitely practicing it in different rhythms, all those different brain disruptors really help get us there faster. So some of these help almost instantly. Some of them you have to, like, practicing in different rhythms for 3 or 4 minutes can make us play a section of a piece way more faster, way more quickly. Some of the things like changing the shape of our hands or getting them to hang out closer to the keys, that might take a few months to really solidify as a new habit. But we start by doing it very conscientiously, in warm-ups for a couple of things. So I would say work with those, and you might find that you do notice things feeling more easy and that you're able to play faster in the upcoming weeks or so. Yeah. Do you have any, yeah, you're welcome. Do you have any questions? Don't see any. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike.
Someone else has it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Appreciate that. So, for all of you here who stayed here so long, thank you so much for being here. And I do want to answer some of your questions. So I know some of you have to go because this is a long session, but I'll answer the questions that I see here in the chat. So I'm just going to do a quick scan of them. And I also appreciate the way you wrote kind comments to the people who were playing. I love seeing people from all over the world. This is amazing how many of you are here. So give me a moment as I scan through all of these comments, because I know there were questions that came in that I didn't deal with at the time. Oh, Colleen asking what was the tuner app, which Diana answered. The TE tuner, that's the one I used with the smile face. I love that app. It's I believe both Android and iOS. So that's a really good one. Tonal Energy, or TE for short. And someone had mentioned, someone asked what brand of synthetic reeds I use. I currently play on the Legere European cut. I can talk more about that later. I first started using them. I thought, it sounds like a pretty good cane reed. Not as good as my best cane reeds. I had this belief that there's some warmth and magic missing from them. And then some of my very favorite players, like a David Schifrin, a Jose Frank Ballester, Corrado Giuffretti, Ricardo Morales, use Legere reeds, and they sound amazing. I thought, oh, well, maybe we can sound good on it. I had to cut myself off from cane for about a month before I started making the Legere sound good. They sounded a bit thin and a bit flat in pitch in my high notes, and I found it really hard to play softly in the altissimo. And somehow experimenting it with it over time, I probably actually improved my embouchure. I had to be even more rounded corners and better with my voicing. I got the effect I want, and it's so nice. I live in a climate where we're in a rainforest, right? Some of the days it rains like crazy for a week. We have the atmospheric rivers like California has, and then it's like totally dry. And my cane reeds would always be changing response. The synthetic reeds always play reliably. So it's made my life easier. If you're experimenting with them, they're very particular on how they're placed on the clarinet. So you might have tried one, and this might be true for the other brands of synthetic reeds too. I'm most familiar with the Legere. They really like to be centered and even with the tip. With my cane reeds, I experiment with moving them around. And I find the ligature needs to be higher and much tighter on a synthetic reed than it does on a cane reed. So if you have a really soft ligature, some of the soft leather ones don't hold the synthetic reeds on tightly enough for their ideal performance. So that's just a factor there. Okay. And there's some talk about the Reed Geek and the other Michelle A. Hey, two Michelle A's, good name you have, has a link to Reed Geek. That's a tool for working on synthetic reeds. On cane reeds. So Alan asking what I feel about them. I love synthetic reeds now that I'm used to them. I would never go back to cane now that I have them working. Someone's saying I have trouble playing a high C from nothing. Yeah, that high C we were demonstrating because it's so fussy. If our air is not fast enough, we'll get that undertone before the note comes out. Getting our tongue higher, like that voicing exercise, helps the air to move faster. That's going to help. One exercise I like to do to practice that, I call it huffing. That's just my unscientific name for it, which is if I had my finger up, trying to blow short bursts of air. In a short burst, we're usually good at engaging our blowing muscles to get speed. I'll try and do that on a pitch, hopefully not moving my embouchure at all. It's tempting for our embouchure to want to move. Taking the high C, and I'll start by huffing it loudly. This doesn't sound good. This is a training exercise. It's not meant to sound beautiful. And I gradually huff softer. So it'll sound kind of like this. Now to start playing softly, I really have to engage my blowing muscles. And if I get those little bursts going, I try and notice what muscles am I using. They're kind of down here around my belly button. And it helps me train to use those until I'm playing very softly. And that's just a quick exercise that I can share with you that will help to make that work better. But just know you need really fast air on high notes and soft notes for it to sound good. Okay, again, I'm scanning through your comments. Thank you so much for everything you've written in here. Are there hand exercises that would help to hold the clarinet properly rather than leaning it on my lap? So if you have hand pain, which is super common, you don't want to mess around with that. You don't want to injure your wrists, your hands. I'd say use tools to help you hold the clarinet. I play with a neck strap all the time. I like the BG neck straps. Neotech is also good. BG makes some with a slight spring to the cord. That's what I'm using, a little bit of an elastic cord. If you tend to move when you play, you might prefer the freedom of the elastic cord. If you play very still, you're going to prefer the unstretchy cord where you just set it in one place. There are also different people have invented different kinds of thumb rests that make a big difference to comfort. They're adjusted to the ideal height for your hand. The one that seems to be most popular with a lot of people is Kooiman, Kooiman. There are these, he has a couple different designs, one less expensive, one fancier. And I see Colleen has one in her hand right now. Colleen, can I make you bigger? Yeah. Do you want to unmute yourself? I'm curious to know how you find it, if you don't mind sharing with the group.
So I came back to the clarinet very late in life, and so I was having trouble that I was not making it to the end of the practice before I didn't want, and the cord was on my neck, and I was just looking to see what the name was on this, and I had to have my clarinet guy, my guy that fixes it for me, install a couple of little screws on it, and then it just slides on, and so I can balance the clarinet just on my one hand, and it's helped me to stay in practice longer.
Great, thank you for that. I'm pretty sure that's one of the Kooiman ones.
It could be, and I'm sorry, I don't know.
No, that's okay. I have seen, I don't have one myself, but I've seen it in other people. And yeah, you do need a technician to install it, but then it's super easy to adjust and use. And that seems to be something that really helps a lot of people out. So that's a recommendation there. All right. Tina's asking, what would a good practice schedule like when you're working on a piece? Do the same things each day or focus on certain days? So yeah, it's a great question. So for me, I always believe in starting with some exercises without music in front of me. Well, you may have some tools that you use, but where I'm just focusing on aspects of my playing. I start with just air. So that would be long tone exercises where I'm just thinking about getting my body relaxed, but my blowing muscles fully engaged. Then I might just do some articulation things. You know, the kind of stuff I was just showing Tom, maybe just going soft to loud. Keep my tongue light. So I'm kind of warming up aspects of my playing. And then when I'm working on repertoire, so what would be an example? If anyone here is from Saskatchewan, a little obscure province in the middle of Canada, I'm going to be featured as a performer and clinician at a clarinet workshop at the end of March. I'm performing 3 challenging pieces as part of it. So I have those kind of on my stand, and I use Modacity, but sometimes I just use a piece of paper. I'll work on a section of it, in detail. That might mean listening to recordings. It might mean looking at the score. It might mean, okay, now I'm going to do some of those finger things where I'm just really working on fingers. So I might be working on 8-10 bars of the first movement in one session. And then I might go on to the second piece, do the same thing. So when I'm first learning it, I'm doing very short bits. Sometimes it's one short bit of the first movement, another short bit of the first movement. And then I'm sort of keeping track what I'm doing. As I get closer and closer to the performance, those little bits get longer. So now I'm doing the whole page and trying to get used to thinking of it as kind of one unit. And then I'm doing a whole movement. And then ideally a couple weeks before it, I'm able to play all 3 pieces, like, start to finish. But you sort of need to take a mental break too. So that's why I like to go between the repertoire. I kind of work on one piece. If I start to feel that all my attention is wandering, then go to a different style, do something else, or take a short break, go for a walk, come back. So that's kind of a general approach there. Karen's asking how to train fingers to play passage with grace notes every beat in a piece faster. So Karen, some of the same things we just talked about, sometimes with grace notes, we tend to really hammer. So just being aware of the lightness and trying it in short sections. I always practice grace note passages without the grace notes first, just to make sure I really know the main notes and the main rhythms. And then I might slip them in one at a time. So I might go dee-yump, dee-ba-yump, dee-yump, dee-da-yump, like practicing without grace note, with each little grace note. And then I might put them together in two bits with grace notes glued together, and then 3. So again, it's little chunks gradually making bigger chunks. Okay. And a lot of you have put in great suggestions for each other. By the way, if anyone wants to save the chat, because there's links recommended or people have written things you like, where you would be writing something in the chat, there's 3 little dots that brings up a menu that lets you save the chat. So I haven't put in many resources, but many of the helpful clarinetists here have put in stuff. Jenny wrote in a note, I think it was when Tom was talking about having trouble seeing the music. She uses a Proline lamp for the stand. I have one of the Aria stand lights. I absolutely love it. I've got really good lighting in this room, so I usually don't use it when I'm practicing, but I bring it to rehearsals where we have dim lights. It clips on and it has a really long battery life. Jomana, it's probably some abbreviation of Zoom, tips for playing with flu, F-L-E-W. Oh, flow, I'm assuming. That's what you mean there. Someone else had written something about flow as well. I think flow is that state where we see our favorite performers. They're playing something that's ridiculously hard. And it just looks like they're going, oh, hello, how are you? And the music has this lovely flow. And it's a simple appearing thing. For us to get to that state, there's a lot of complicated things that go into it. And I really believe it's feeling psychologically at ease, but also making sure our body is really relaxed. So again, I record myself, sometimes just audio, Modacity's audio, but then I'll also, big piece, record myself video and notice, oh, wow, I lift my left shoulder every time I'm about to play that high note. That's making my voice tight. It's probably affecting my clarinet. Okay, how can I relax that? So part of flow is literally not having excess tension in our body. A huge part of flow is that we have experimented with how to breathe and blow out, and trained our air to move steadily and not to have unconscious accents or unconscious breaks in the air. So with a wind instrument, flow is directly related to how does our air flow and getting our air to flow better. So all the kind of exercises, long tones that help increase our awareness of how to use the air help us with that. And then recording short passages where we're really focusing on smoothness of air. Those are things that contribute to flow over time. Again, we could spend 2 hours on flow, but that's the real quick version of it. And Marge saying suggestions on building speed with staccato tonguing. So Marge, having a hammer tongue will slow you down more than anything. So what we were doing with Tom of getting it to play lighter and lighter, having our tongue not hit hard and not move much is really helpful. And I'm going to be sharing more of those next session. Tina's asking which Albert Scale book. believe it was the Albert one edited by Julie. Maybe Tom, you could write it in. Julie from Chicago. Can't remember her last name now. Oh, sorry, it was Mike, not Mike. Tom Mike had the Albert scale book. So someone will write it in there since I don't have it in my brain. Yeah, Peter has a question here. Some instructors stress eliminating body movements when you're playing, but when you watch people, you see many of them move. So do I have general pointers on body movement? I do. If you're playing chamber music, which I play quite a bit, you don't have a conductor, but you have a group that plays together, you need to use body movement to cue your other musicians in your group. So not moving at all becomes impractical, but certain kind of movements will interfere with our ability to play well. So you have to be strategic in the movements that you use. If your clarinet is moving this way, like any way where it's being bumped or drastically changing the angle it makes with your face, that's going to cause embouchure instability and make it hard to play. A lot of times when you see people moving their upper body or head, you'll notice that their clarinet is still kind of at the same angle with their head. It's like I'm gluing this together and then going like this. So the movement that I'm making is not changing where my clarinet moves. I can cue the cello player, but my whole head is involved in that cue, or my whole upper body, or sometimes it's just my elbows. So just, you have to kind of be mindful of that. I've heard some phenomenal players who don't move at all. They sound really expressive. Other times movement can make it seem more expressive. So there we go. I'm going to try and answer the questions that are here. I do have another session starting in 15 minutes, so I'll wrap it up in a couple minutes, but I'll get as many of your questions answered as I can. John said, is there a difference between different styles of Legere reeds, signature versus Eurocut? Yeah, there is. I'd say 80, I think when I talked to someone at Legere, they said 80 or 90% of professionals prefer the European cut. A small number like the signature cut. So it's what works on your mouthpiece and all that kind of stuff. Someone says tips for pinky finger notes. Get to know both sides really, really well so that you know all of your left hand and right hand pinky notes, and get your fingers moving super, super relaxed. So, a good exercise that a lot of people like to do is work on just your right hand, where it's called pinkies around the world. You just go the first note, the one below it, the one below it, back and forth, and you go both directions. So I can go clockwise, I can go counterclockwise. Again, focus on light, relaxed fingers and just get really good at them. Okay, I'm doing the super one. Tips on picking a piece for an audition. If it's an audition, do something that you like and you sound great at. You want to if you're going to be working on a lot, make sure it's a piece you enjoy. If you're doing an audition, you typically, if you feel comfortable, want to show off several different strengths. So include something that's slow and lyrical, where you can really show off your musicality and tone, and then something that shows off the technique you do well, whether that's fast tonguing or fast fingers. So if you can find a piece that maybe does a bit of all of that, that's helpful. That's the quick version, Colleen. Heidi, what does a professional wooden clarinet do over an intermediate model? So a wooden clarinet, as opposed to a plastic clarinet, just the material itself, wood can give it a softer, more mellow tone. If you have a plastic clarinet and you want to upgrade, a less expensive introduction to that is consider just getting a wooden barrel. I've had students with a plastic clarinet put on a wooden barrel and have it really warm up and enhance the sound. And there's lots of companies who make good wooden barrels. I use the Vaughan barrels. I live in the same city as the Vaughan factory, so I'm so fortunate, but they make different kinds of wood, different shape. The other nice thing about a barrel, we all play in tune differently. If the barrel that comes with your instrument, if you're always having to pull a lot to play in tune, if you tend to play sharp, a longer barrel will really help with your tuning, and it's better than just pulling one out. So you can try a longer barrel. Also, the higher end clarinets then often have with it slightly better key work, and they have other advantages that are unrelated to the wood, but you just tend to find better craftsmanship. But most important is the mouthpiece and reed combo. So if you're upgrading and you have the basic mouthpiece that came with it, you're probably making it harder on yourself. And everyone has different shaped mouth. We would pick different mouthpieces. If you have the ability to go into a music store and play test mouthpieces, you're going to find that some are going to work for you much better. Will's asking, how do you increase double tonguing speed and tonguing in upper altissimo? It's like any skill that we want to do faster on. Again, we make sure we're relaxed, so you're not going taka taka taka, but you're just and just do it on one pitch, comfortably relaxed. Double tonguing we don't tend to do slow, but go slower to faster. Make sure you're not moving too much. Make sure your air is always super strong, and then just try it on different pitches, but again, it's being super focused on that one issue. Okay. Cindy says, I play in a buffet R13. I find low E and F are very flat. That's true for most clarinets. Some of them now have these special keys that open up. A different barrel is not going to help a whole lot. That is a clarinet design flaw, Cindy. Sometimes different bells help move the air a little differently, but you'll see most of the high-end clarinets now have a key that opens on those low notes to help improve the tonguing. If I'm playing a piece that has a lot of those notes, I'll tune my clarinet a little sharp for that, but otherwise we just have to do what we can to bring it up. Yeah, Karen's asking, are synthetic reeds equivalent in strength to cane? They're similar. Most manufacturers will put a chart, saying if you play this reed, here's the one that's going to work best for us. I know with Legere, they're expensive. If you buy one and it's the wrong strength, they'll mail you a different one instead. Like you can say, oh, I got a 3, it's really too hard. Then they'll say, oh, we'll try 2 3/4. They want you to be hooked on their devices. Okay, one more question, and the rest of you, I hope you'll come back. We have a session on Thursday. It's later in the day. I'm sorry it's not European friendly, but I always get the Australians complaining if I don't have a session that works for them. I will record it. That's going to be a guided practice session where I'm going to show you some of the warm-up techniques that I do and show you with a piece of music in front of me that many of you can play how I would prepare it. So I'll try and send that worksheet out to you in advance. If you got an email from me this morning like saying our session's on February, that was a mistake. It was an old, outdated practice sheet. It was similar to what we're going to do, but I have a different one. I'll send it out to you. Maybe I'll send it out with the replay later today. That's coming up. So join us for that. We have another masterclass a week from tomorrow where we have 3 other players. So last question will be Colette. Do I leave my clarinet out so it's easy to pick up? Is it bad for the instrument? Should they be stored? So if you have a wooden clarinet, it's better for the instrument to be stored in its case. I also use, let me make myself bigger. This is a handy resource. Maury Bakun recommended this to me. The Boveda 3-way humidity control pack, 49%. This was made by string instruments, I think guitar players. It's a case, it sits in your clarinet case and it regulates humidity when it's really wet. It takes some of it out of the case when it's really dry. It helps put it back. They make them in little sizes and big. I think this is the big one. You can see it's, about just slightly smaller than half my hand. It's about $3 or $4 for one of them. Having said that, so any clarinet repair person will tell you always clean your instrument out thoroughly, put it away in the case. Having said that, there's times where I'm practicing, I do a quick swab, I know I'm going to practice again, like later that day I'm in a hurry, I'll leave it out. Not ideal. I do it because it makes it more likely that I'll walk back in and pick it up and play it. Not ideally for the instrument, we're always putting it away. If you have a plastic instrument, it's less fussy, but you should definitely always swab it dry so you don't get water into the pads. Okay, apologize if I haven't gotten to all your questions. More will be coming. Thank you all so much for being here. I want to give special thanks to the people who volunteered to play for you. Eileen, Mike, Tom, and Gwenda. We learned so much by using you as our examples, so thank you, everyone. And for those of you who are enjoying this, I'll also give you more information coming up. We have a community that does this on a regular basis. It's so much fun. People learn so much, and I'm going to invite you to join. So that's coming later. All right. I do have a tradition that I want you to take part in here, which is unmute yourself, wave around, say a big goodbye. I'll try and get you all on screen, and that's how we're going to end our session. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Good day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.